Welcome aboard. This is the March Podpage monthly community meetup. Today, we are going to be talking about growing your podcast via newsletters. Glad to see everybody here. So, we're going to be talking about growing your show with newsletters. And you might be thinking, newsletters? Is that the thing from the 80s? And I'm like, yeah, but there's a reason they're still around. I'll put it this way. It is 2 o'clock as we record this. How many people have checked their email today? Okay, and then some of us have been on YouTube, but maybe not everybody. That's an interesting question, because it used to be you'd get up, check your email. Now you get up and you check your texts and things of that nature. But we definitely will get into some stats that may surprise you when it comes to, newsletters versus especially social media. And for this, I want to say this up front. I'm not anti-social media. It's just if you can have something that works a little better, maybe you might try that. I mean, right now, everybody is all hot and bothered about YouTube because it's, hey, oh my gosh, it's the second largest search engine. So you'd be kind of silly not to use that, right? Well, okay, well, what if I said there's something better than maybe social media for trying to grow your audience? Social is a great place to be social and hang out with your audience and things of that nature. So with that, let's hop on here. So here are some fun-filled stats. We're not going to have a ton of these because there's nothing more fun than live math. Woohoo, right? And so they're saying here that if you look at social, now granted, that's Facebook, 2.9 billion versus 3.2 to 4.7 in email. And you could say that, if we added up all the TikToks and Threads and Blue Sky and X/Twitter and this, and it's probably more than maybe 4.7 billion. Maybe, we'll see. But here's the fun thing. Email's one place. It's your inbox. And you don't have to think about it if you had to go to every website from someone that sent you an email. Eek, that would not be fun. So that's the beauty of it. Everybody is on email. So keep that in mind. Some other fun-filled stats here. When it comes to receiving marketing material, and what this question is when it comes to receiving marketing material. In other words, like, hey, I know you're probably going to try to sell me something, or you're going to update me on something or whatever. Here again, email, 72%. People are like, yeah, I kind of expect to be marketed to in email. In fact, I had to opt into that when I signed up, versus social is 17%. So people aren't really looking to be sold to on social. And the next time you're on social, kind of step back from yourself and go, what am I doing here? And I'm usually looking for maybe news stories, but I'm not really looking. There are those, and you always get the person, episode 16 is out. Okay, great. That's fine. It's branding. You're keeping your brand in front of people. But in terms of, hey, I'm ready to be sold to, because as somebody who has a teaching background, the one thing every teacher wants is just a willing student. That's all I want. Quit looking at your phone in class, right? And so as people that are trying to grow their audience, we're looking for people that are open to receiving our message. And according to this, they're much more open in email. I'm like, that's interesting. What about open rates? Well, in social, I didn't realize it was that bad. 2.4% versus somewhere between 15 and 25 for email. And so this is, because I thought, like, wait a minute, you don't really open social. But I think what they're talking about there is, if you think about it, when you send, what do you call a Blue Sky? I just call everything a tweet. Doesn't matter if you're on Instagram, Everybody's sending tweets. Why not? Sure. But you create a post, and if somebody has a lot of people they're following, that just flies by. I don't know what the average lifespan of a social post is, but that's why I think their open rate is so low, because a lot of times it's like, and you're like, oh, unless they scroll down, they're probably not going to see that. And I was like, that's an interesting point. Now, when it comes to once they've opened it, what's the click-through rate? And this is the one that's always depressing. But there's my favorite number, 3%. I tell people all the time, and look, I don't want to believe it either, but 3% of your audience will take action. And they're like, I'm going to get at least 50% no, 20% no, 10% if you're a demigod, 5% maybe. If you really, really get 3%, will actually click on. So it's 25% opened, 3% of the 25%. And I know you're like, well, Dave, that's not very good. Like, well, it's a heck of a lot better than social media if you're trying to interact with people. So keep that in mind. And later we'll be talking about, okay, but what do I put in a newsletter? We will talk about there are 8 million different email tools. And I've got some resources for you towards the end here. And we'll get into all that as we go along. So keep that in mind. Michelle says, hey, I just found your show on Spotify. I'm looking forward to listening to it. Well, thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. Moving on to the next stat here. Now, this is just a Dave thing. So I went over and I looked at my email list, and right now I have around 1,600 people. And previously, last year, I had 1,300 people. And there's a part of you that gets hung up with numbers, right? Our ego primarily. And I was like, hey, like I'm in the 4 figures here. And I only, shame on me, had basically 300 people join the email list in a year. And I was like, well, wait a minute. If you take the difference, so it's 300 divided by the original is 23% growth. And so if you could grow your audience, if you could grow anything by 23%, I'll take that. I mean, granted, 50% would be better, but I'll take 23%. Money in my savings account, right? We're all getting, 5% maybe if we're lucky these days. So that's just me. That is a survey of one, but I just was like, well, what can you kind of expect? So what do I write about? And I get this because when you're like, hey, Dave, you're talking about a newsletter, which means I have to, type, I have no idea. Which, number one, don't sell yourself short. You're a podcaster. You're a content creator. And it used to drive me kind of bonkers when I would find a blogger back in the day of blogs, right? They're still around. And I would find a blogger that was phenomenal. And I'd be like, this is great content. You should turn this into a podcast. And they would go, I'm just a writer. And I would be like, well, actually, you're a content creator. Why not put your content in every form you can so people can consume it? And I would say, I really like that blog post, but I can't read it on the way to work in the car. But I could listen to it if it was a podcast. And I say the same thing to YouTubers. I'm like, yeah, YouTube has a lot of people. Have you ever thought of taking your YouTube, pulling out the audio, unless it's something where it's woodworking and you got to watch me do something, but audio outperforms video 10-1 because there's more time to listen than there is to watch. And so when I see bloggers, I'm like, you've done the hard part. You created the content. Why not put that out as a podcast? And now it's the direct opposite. Hey, you've done the hard part. You've put the content out as audio. Why not kind of shape that into a newsletter? And so some things to think about. The director's cut. If you've ever watched a movie and they have the director's cut, and it's usually a couple extra scenes that for whatever reason maybe for time, maybe for who knows what, but they cut a couple scenes. And in the end, they weren't bad scenes. It was already a 4-hour movie. They're like, we need to cut something. So they cut some stuff. Well, maybe you had that with an episode, or the direct opposite. Maybe you started an episode and you're like, normally my episodes are X amount of minutes and this isn't long enough. And I could either try to expand this, but I mean, it's really only this. Like, this is the point, and it takes about 7 minutes. Well, that's a great topic then to maybe put as a newsletter and do a summary. So the stuff that didn't make the cut doesn't always mean it's bad, but you might be able to throw that in there. So that's something that what I call the director's cut. Things that didn't quite make it. Sounds Profitable has a podcast, and it's based on their newsletter. They're basically saying, hey, in the newsletter, we talked about topic A, which does such and such and such and such. Little tease there. Hey, if you want more information, you got to go read our newsletter. But at the end, they do like a weekly wrap up. And they're like, and here are some things that didn't actually make the show, but you might want to go check out. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Director's cut kind of information that you might want to throw in there. Something else, and I just threw these all together because otherwise we'd be here for 2 hours if I put a slide for all of these. So this is my only death by PowerPoint slide that, that I have today, because we all love death by PowerPoint. But it could be industry news, books. I've had people on occasion be, hey, I'm reading this book. And they're like, what did you think of it? And I was like, well, I'm on chapter 7 and it's a winner. And then they're like, all right, I'm going to go buy it, because if you say it's good, it's good. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. And that's where you go, my words have power, right? And you're like, but it's true. Life lessons. This is where it's kind of strange because, look, you know that I know that you know that I know that, you're just you and I'm just me. I'm just in a spare bedroom. But anytime you can make a point by sharing a lesson or just what you're thinking or what you're feeling. I had a friend of mine die. Was it last week? I guess it was last week, last Monday or the Monday, but it wasn't anyway. And it bummed me out. Shocking. Death is still no fun. And I just shared a little bit about it and how it made me get back on a treadmill and how it made me watch what I'm eating and things like that. So now, what does that have to do with podcasting? Absolutely nothing. But it's when you have a newsletter, it's people that are saying, hey, I like your stuff and I want more from you because I like your style. I like what you believe in. It either makes me laugh, cry, think, groan, educate, or entertain. Now, I kind of tied it into podcasting. I said, look, the thing that's sad about my buddy Neil that died is he did make a documentary called The Messengers, by the way. When you're done, go look up The Messengers, a podcast documentary on YouTube. And he has a legacy. He's going to live on in his content. And so I did tie it into podcasting, but sometimes those life lessons, you can kind of make a point as well as let people kind of know what's going on in your life. Another one you can do is polls. If you want to, figure out, hey, I'm thinking of doing something in my show, and you're like, I don't know if my audience would like this or not. Well, you've already got a group of people that said, hey, I like your stuff so much that I gave you my email address. I said, here it is. Here's my email. Please don't spam me. And you send it away, and they like you, and they want more stuff. And you're like, hey, valued newsletter reader, I'm thinking of doing this in the podcast. What do you think? And then you send them to a Google form or there's Tally. I think it's tally.so. Really pretty, because I know some people are like, I'm not giving anything to Google. They're the devil. All right, well, here's an alternative if you don't want to use Google Forms. And then the other one is a good old-fashioned call to action. So if you want them to do something, the beauty of it is they are one click away from doing whatever it is you want them to do. We'll talk about that a little later. Resources. We have resources today that we'll be talking about when you're like, Dave, I still don't know what to talk about. All right, I've got some resources for you. And I have a section of my newsletter that is just called What Caught My Eye. And what I put in that section is, I know, wait for it, what caught my eye. So this might be something I saw on YouTube that I was like, wow, that's really cool. Or it might be like I just found out about some tool that you can use to get emails from Facebook groups. And I was like, is that legal? Like that kind of stuff. So I do a little bit of stuff, but not really. That's a great example of not really 100% fit for my podcast audience, because not everybody uses Facebook groups. But I can throw it in the newsletter, and the people are like, ooh, there's another cool tool that I learned from Dave. The other thing you can do are episode summaries. So sometimes it's like, hey, last week we talked about newsletters, and it turns out we had a part 2, and yada, yada, yada. And now you're giving that person the bonus, the extended dance version of your episode. So if there was something else you wanted to add, you could do that. So you can see it doesn't have to be one thing. It can be many things that you want. And like these, I don't do this in every episode of my newsletter. Mine kind of has a format. If you want to see it, it's podcastingobservations.com, which for the record, when I think about it, yes, it's an easy to remember address, but that really should be, for me, because I run a website called the School of Podcasting, it should be schoolofpodcasting.com/newsletter, because that reinforces my brand. But I had a domain burn a hole in my pocket, so I'm like, I'll point that one in my newsletter. But you'll see where there's the top section is just basically me talking about what happened this week. And then it's here's my latest content. And I always have just the title of the episode and so to say, like the name of the show. And then there's a button to follow, because we all love those followers. And then a link to the episode. And this is where your episode titles really come in handy, because nobody cares that it's episode 16. I cannot say that enough. I know it's like the Hatfields and the McCoys, like episode titles or episode numbers in episode titles, and they fight each other. But I'm a fan of no episode titles or episode numbers in the titles. But that's where those work. And then I have my maybe something that I want to promote. So podcaster happy hours, a little networking event I promote. And then it's here's what caught my eye, and here's what's coming in the future. And the here's what's coming in the future sometimes gets people like, oh, you're going to be talking about this in the future? Did you know about such and such? And my audience will actually help me shape my content, which is exactly what you want. You want content that people want. So keep that in mind. And now, Dave, what's the best one? Well, I am not saying any of these are the best. I'm saying these are ones I have used. And so there are shapes. Yes, that's where you take a shape and a size and you put it together and you get a shape. Shapes and sizes. Substack is free. They do have a business model, because I don't know if you know this or not. Free is a horrible business model. Many companies have gone out of business when they charge nothing, because it turns out, when you buy other things for your company, they want money and you don't have any because it's free. So Substack's business plan is, if you want, you can charge people for your newsletter. Remember, 3% of your people will, if you are really, really good. And they will take 10% of the money that you make. So they have a business model, but if nobody's selling their stuff, so I'm a little like, I have some stuff on Substack. I'm playing with it right now, but there's a part of me that goes, yeah, this isn't a super solid business model. I'd have to see if they put out any kind of reports and things like that. Then another one I've used is SendFox. And SendFox is an AppSumo program. And if you've never played with AppSumo, it's a very dangerous place. They have all sorts of software at deep discounts, and a lot of, you'll see where I put the LTD there. That stands for lifetime deal. So you can basically buy SendFox for life for $50. Now, SendFox is a little more marketing-ish, where Substack, I think they expect people to sit back and pontificate. I'm going to write my thesis on Substack, and I will tell the world. A lot of reporters now are like, I'm going to Substack and sharing my opinion because I got something to say. So I'm not sure, like, you're not getting a lot of A/B split testing kind of stuff on a Substack. It's meant more, it's almost like a blog / newsletter tied into one. Where SendFox is definitely newsletter, and it's got some neat features. One of the features we'll talk about here is they can take your RSS feed and turn it into an actual email. Now that's if you're like, okay, that's fine. But if I want like a team, if I have a team of people, well, that's not going to work. SendFox is kind of made for the solopreneur. And but MailerLite and both Kit, previously known as ConvertKit, both of these allow, I believe it's 1,000, if not more people for free. And at first you're like, wait, it's only 1,000 is a lot of people. They're like, it's a lot of people. And so keep that in mind. And so I went over and looked at both those accounts, and MailerLite, when you start to pay, is $13 a month, and Kit was $25 a month. Kit, where I feel like we're playing, the Three Bears here. MailerLite, a little more marketing than SendFox, and Kit has all sorts of fun bells and whistles. And in my opinion, and that's all it is, so it's a survey of one, I think Kit's interface is a little more user-friendly because you can do things and say, like, when somebody signs up, send them this PDF and then put them in this little thing, which sends them an email every other week or something like that, which you can do in MailerLite. It's just, there's just for me, just a little bit of clunkiness sometimes in MailerLite, but it is cheaper. So if you can put up some clunkiness, MailerLite, and again, whichever budget you're on, if you're like, I'm just going to start off, you might use Substack. So, and if you Google email tools, good night. You're welcome to the rabbit hole. There's moose. There's something with an octopus. A lot of animals involved when it comes to marketing newsletters, but there are a ton of Aweber, MailKimp, for those of us that remember, Serial. They had a MailChimp commercial, and it went so viral because they had this little kid, and he went to say MailChimp, and he went MailKimp, and there are a lot of people that still call MailChimp MailKimp. And they all kind of do the same thing. Go over and look at the pricing, look at the interfaces, watch YouTube maybe if you want to see their interface. But you are not at a loss for opportunities to send emails, just a matter of which one. So right now I am using SendFox because I want to do a little more marketing stuff. I'm actually in the process of moving to ConvertKit. So that's where I'm headed. And then I mentioned this earlier, almost all of these, I don't know that Substack does, but there is a feature in the other ones, I know for a fact, that you can take the RSS feed from your media host, whoever it is, Spotify, Captivate, Buzzsprout, Libsyn, Blueberry. Again, talk about more choices again. You can take your RSS feed, and now whatever you type in as your show notes in Libsyn, in Blueberry, in Captivate, whoever, whatever you type there, in the same way that Captivate takes that and turns it into a website, these email tools will turn it into a newsletter and then just send it on out. So the only thing that's kind of interesting, and it depends on each one, but in some cases, I would actually put a link in the show notes to the actual episode, because in theory, in most places, you're looking at it. But because this was going to a newsletter, at the very end, it was like, this originated on this website. And they could click on it in the newsletter, and it would actually send them to the website. So that's another feature that can be kind of handy. If you're like, Dave, I got nothing. I don't know what to type, or I don't have time to write a newsletter. For my little basic newsletter, the last 2 weeks, I've kind of started a timer. And if you don't have one of these, you should. You can get them at Amazon, or there's online stuff. But you basically just hit it and let it start, either counting up or counting down, because there are times when you don't realize, wow, I just wasted 45 minutes watching reels on Facebook. So we only have so much time, but I think it took me a half hour to put together, and that's making images in Canva and things like that. Because again, I'm not writing War and Peace. I'm writing maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs. It's in my head. Now, the other thing is, being a guy that's been teaching for 20 plus years, I know how to type. I also know how to make typos, but I'm not a hunt and pecker. Nothing wrong with being somebody who hunts and pecks, but that's not me. So your mileage may vary when it comes to how much time it takes to write a newsletter. But even that, You can use things like otter.ai and fire up a microphone and just start to talk, and it will transcribe whatever you're saying. Keep in mind, we don't talk like we write, and we don't write like we talk. So sometimes you're like, I'm just going to take a transcript and I'm like, because go read that, and you'll probably see where, like I said, we don't talk like we write. We don't write like we talk. So you might want to throw that into some sort of AI tool and tell it, do not lose my voice, but can you brush this up a bit and maybe focus it a bit or things like that. I am, when it comes to AI, and this is again another one, everybody has their own opinion. I'm a fan because I don't have a problem writing stuff, copying it, throwing it into Claude or ChatGPT or whatever AI tool you're using and saying, a lot of times my prompt is just, can you make this better? And it does. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it still sounds like me. And then I just take out the word delve and deep dive about 50 million times and we're good to go. So that is an option. The goal here is just to let you know, hey, if you're like, I am not a writer at all, well, then you might just have it convert your RSS. So the other thing here is that we want to talk about is how to get people to sign up. And that in itself can be a bit of a struggle. And the one thing that really blew me away one time is, because you always hear about lead magnets, and we'll talk about what those are and how do you make them. But I was like, well, what would my audience like? What would be the benefit of signing up to the newsletter? Because nobody's waking up going, ugh, man, I hope I can find a newsletter today. Only if I'm lucky enough will I find. Nobody's doing that. Yeah. Danny says, who is this Dave Jackson and why are you in my feed? Thank you, Danny. But yeah, so what I did one time, and I was really surprised because I would get, the occasional person here and the occasional person here signing up for my newsletter. And I said, hey, if you're listening to this right now and you're on a treadmill, or I don't know, maybe you're on the way to work, be sure to, pay attention, or maybe you're out in the middle of the woods on a bike and you're like, oh, I need to remember to go back to that guy's website and check that thing that he just got me all hot and bothered about. I got to go get that book. Did you know that you can have my website come to your email? I might just go to, mywebsite.com/newsletter. So in my case, that's schoolofpodcasting.com/newsletter. Sign up and you can have the show notes automatically delivered to you for free. That was my big wild pitch. And I thought, oh, nobody's going to go for that. And a lot of people went for that, not thousands, but I was amazed there where normally I got this little drip like, hey, you got 2 people this week. Cause I was going, sign up for the newsletter. And they're all going, what's in it for me? But when I said, oh, by the way, here's how you can benefit. You can have the show notes come to you. I probably had 10, maybe 15 people in a week. And at the time that was like unheard of. So that's one way. If you're like, I don't know how to get people to sign up, just explain to them, you can have the show notes come to your inbox absolutely free. Now, you don't have to use a crappy radio voice, but, do your own thing. So that's one way you can get people to sign up. Because in the end, what it boils down to is people want to benefit, right? I want to benefit. So when you explain to them, hey, here's a way you can benefit, oh, then maybe they'll actually jump in on that. Thank you very much, Danny. Liking the sound of the Rode Pod mic. Now, a couple other quick things here in terms of, Dave, I don't know how to do an email. If you're on the elite plan, you can go to pages and come down to grow, and there is a Podpage AI, and you can actually go in and pick an episode and say, hey, what it does. This is great for the person that doesn't want to do a newsletter every week. Maybe you want to do one a month and you do a weekly show. You can say, hey, go into Grow, Podpage AI, click on newsletters. It'll also write blog posts for you if you want. And with the newsletter one, it looks back 4 weeks and says, hey, let's look at your episodes. And it will actually make a summary like, hey, here was episode 1 with great title that makes people want to click. Here's a little paragraph that makes you want to click even more. And then here's the second one, third one. And you can basically take that, copy it, and paste it into your newsletter, however you want to do that. So Miss Eileen is here. Holy cow. Not that we didn't have enough cool people already, but Miss Eileen, and Ray from Around the Layout, please don't use crappy radio voice. Yes, that's no good. And Michelle says, sell the sizzle, not the steak. That is a great line. Many, many, many moons ago, I worked at a copier company, and this old sales guy that started the company, and he was like, sell the sizzle, not the steak. So keep that in mind as we do that. So that is something that's in Podpage. There is an AI writer. If you need help writing a newsletter, we can do that. Now, another thing, and this is one, I don't know about you, does anybody here hate pop-ups? Or is anybody here like, I love pop-ups? When I'm trying to read something and all of a sudden, right in your face, Podpage does have a pop-up. And I kind of was like, not sure about this. Pop-ups, I hate them when they do that. And then I started using them. And I found out why people use pop-ups. They work. Yeah, they really do. I was like, holy cow. Yeah. No, Michelle, I'm not calling you old. Never. You are timeless. Are you kidding me? Not at all. But pop-ups can work. And in Podpage, you can go in and say, look, wait 60 seconds before this pop-up even appears. And then you could say, only show it to people X amount of days if you want to use the built-in pop-up. And that can be a pop-up to both. It can be either be sign up for my newsletter, or if you're promoting something, maybe your book launch is here or something, you can use that to just click here and pre-order my book kind of thing. Randy is not a fan of pop-ups. No, he has there's a puke emoji. Who knew? Beautiful things. Yeah, Eileen says, I hate it when I see my own pop-up. Yeah, I get it. But I'm here to tell you, if you've never used one, experiment. And Chris says, did someone say Pop-Tarts or pop-ups? No. Yeah, Pop-Tarts. Come on, brown sugar, cinnamon, you got to love them. Danny says this is the best one. Exit intent, timed pop-ups, and relevant. Oh, my favorite word. That is the word of the month for me. Relevant to the page you're on. So custom each message and offer, and they become super effective. So yes, that is some great advice from the one and only Danny Brown from Captivate.fm. Yeah, good stuff. So don't. There's a nice shot of the woods back here. There we go. So keep that in mind. If you're like, hey, I'm not really getting anything. I was amazed, as much as, I kind of don't want to annoy people. I was like, hey, there is something to this pop-up thing. Now, what about lead magnets? Because that's another fun one. You'll hear that phrase, get them a lead magnet. And so in general, lead magnets solve a problem, novel idea. They deliver value. They're easy to consume. So when people are like, you can sign up now for free and get my 4,000 page ebook on how to blah, and they're like, no, we don't want a 4,000 page ebook. What we want is a one cheat sheet where you read the 4,000 page ebook. Now just give me the 10 steps to do what that ebook talked about. So anytime, we all know the hot buttons, right? Anytime we can save them time or money or anything like that, that's going to be a bonus. And then some sort of immediate gratification. So by that, it's like, hey, I did these steps, and lo and behold, I'm getting more traffic to my website. I'm losing weight. I'm doing whatever it is your audience is trying to do. And all of a sudden, what's going to happen, they're like, hey, that Dave guy, that Eileen guy, that Danny, this guy seems to know what he's talking about. Miss Eileen said I should try this on my YouTube channel, and it's working. Well, now when you say, oh, by the way, I got this other stuff for sale, they're going to be more than likely to, the first thing that they gave away for free was amazing. Holy cow, if that was their free stuff and all I had to give up was an email, and now I'm doing this other thing. So lead magnets, and this is one of those things, actually, if you go to YouTube and just search for how to write a lead magnet, there are probably 50 million YouTube videos on that. So it's, again, you think has to be War and Peace. Now it can just be like one of my lead magnets is just a checklist. Why? Because I heard people go, I don't know, when it comes to podcasting, I don't even know where to start. I'm like, okay, schoolofpodcasting.com/checklist. Here's the do this, then that, then this, then that. And then, of course, at the end, it's like, oh, and by the way, if you need more help, that whole 9 yards. And you could do the same thing. They don't have to be War and Peace. In fact, people like them to be short, actionable. They deliver value. Going back to Danny's word, right? They're relative to what people are looking for. So when you know their pain, the checklist can solve that. And they will gladly go ahead and give you an email for that. Yeah, we've already hit this one to death. My next slide was, why do people use pop-ups? Because they work. In a nutshell, that's why people use pop-ups. Didn't quite get it until I started using them, and it was like, holy cow. So here are some resources. If you're like, hey, Dave, you know what? I get the newsletter thing. I love that Podpage makes it easy because you can just embed your form right into Podpage. So if you want, and we'll talk about this in a second, but Podpage can collect emails, but we're talking about having another system. And if you're still like, I'm just not going to write a newsletter. I got too much stuff. I got 7 kids and soccer practice and, a spouse. Like, I can't do it. Well, in some cases, advertising on another podcast, that would be the best because we know those people listen to podcasts, right? But another one might be, especially if you have a hyper niche show, is if you go to tinkmedia.com and go to Podcast Friends, they have a thing for a newsletter database. And I know, hard to believe, wait for it, it's a database of newsletters. And so you can search for your topic and see if there's anything that fits, and then see if they charge to advertise in there. Maybe if it's somebody similar to what you're doing, then maybe you're like, hey, do you want to swap promos? Like, put an ad for me in your newsletter and I'll talk about your newsletter on my podcast. All sorts of ways to partner that. So if you didn't know, there is a database of newsletters, and Tink Media has a lot of fun stuff over there too, as well as they have a newsletter that promotes their products and services. And so that might be one you want to check out again. Tink Media, not think, Tink, as in like Herbel, right? Tinkmedia.com is where you can find that. Some other services here as we start to head towards the door. These are 2 I just recently found in the last year. I went to Ecamm Creator Camp because my buddy Jeff C. said it was cool, and he was right. And it was there that I met Liz Wilcox, and Liz Wilcox has templates, and they're fairly cheap of things to send out an email. And I just met Paul Gowder, who is another friend of Jeff C. So if you hang around Jeff C., you'll meet all sorts of cool people. And C is SIEH. And I interviewed Paul Gowder this week. And he is another guy that has a ton of resources. He's email and community kind of combined. And he was talking about how, it really, sometimes we overthink, oh, I don't have the perfect lead magnet. He's like, well, just put out what you got. But both those folks, Liz and Paul, they live in the email space. So as much as I've played with email and I use it and things like that, those folks live and breathe and swim and eat newsletters all the time. And then I asked Paul, I said, hey, like when it comes to newsletters, like what's the biggest mistake? Because the one thing anytime you do something new, right? If somebody hands you some sort of new technology, right? And it's brand new and you're looking at it and you're like, oh, wait, I don't want to drop it. I don't want to break it, right? Hold on. And we're always worried like, okay, well, if I start a newsletter, like what's the worst thing that could happen? I'll tell you one mistake I made with this, but when I asked Paul, I go, what's the big mistake that people make? And he goes, not collecting them. And I remember I was listening to Pat Flynn from Smart Passive Income once, and he said one of his biggest kind of regrets was he didn't start an email list earlier. He said it was probably, he was a big blogger before he got into podcasting and YouTube. And he said, man, if I had been collecting emails all this time when I was writing a blog, he goes, I can't imagine how big that list would have been. Because again, when you have those people on a list that chose to get your stuff, and they can unsubscribe anytime they want. You have to, for legal purposes, have to have an unsubscribe button in your newsletter. These are people that are still choosing to consume your stuff. And one way you can look at this is, some of us are like, hey, please rate and review us. It helps us get found. Well, first things first, it is social proof, absolutely 100% social proof. And so if your show has 15 reviews and the one next to you has 4, sure, people may click on your show for that. But you get your review from, Jim Mom 47, and Jim Mom 47 says, love Dave's show. He's great. Yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. Or my favorite, if you get a 1-star review, a really bad show for a really bad product. Isn't it odd how you can quote your 1-star reviews like they're scripture, right? But ask me to quote a 5-star and I can't do it. But 1-star, a really bad show for a really bad product. I can't email anybody that leaves me a review. So I got them to do one thing for me, and that's it. We're out. But if I'd asked them to join my email list, well, number one, I could ask them to leave a review. That would be nice. I could later in another email say, hey, can you take this poll for me? Hey, I've got a new book for sale. Can you buy the book? Now I've got multiple opportunities to do something with that person, as well as I don't get this a lot, and it's going to be a static I'm going to start paying attention to. But on occasion, I will get people that will forward my own email to me and say, this was really great. It helped me think about something completely different. And that, to me, unsolicited feedback, either good or bad, is great. And you just don't get that from reviews. And so I'm not saying reviews are bad. I will say they do not help you get found. That has been said by Apple. Apple has said this does nothing to the charts. They are social proof, and that social proof can definitely lead to people clicking. But in terms of it helps us get up the charts, because that's been repeated per nauseum, that people think it's true. And Apple has said, no, this has nothing to do with the charts. If the reason you're going up the charts, it might be from social proof, but there's no algorithmically benefit of having a review. So keep that in mind. And then with that, we will, perfect. I wanted to leave 15 minutes for questions, and that's about where we are at this point. So, and if anybody has, if you're like, oh, that was good, Dave, but you forgot to mention this or that, throw it in the chat room here, and we will have a nice little talk here as we do this. But it's something that I'm looking into really the last couple months, where I've just, the other thing I do is you can do this too in Google Analytics. Now I use a tool called Fathom for stats on my website, but you can make links, and you'll see these when you click on anything from a newsletter. It'll be like != equals blah, 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 such and such, hashtag, whatever. And all that extra stuff after the link is something that when it goes to my website, I can see where it came from. And when I looked at the traffic from Facebook and Reddit, and I get traffic from both those because I'm over there answering questions, but I was really surprised how much traffic I got from my newsletter. And I was like, oh, because I try to do that once a week. And I was amazed that oh, wait, look, this is way more than I'm getting from social media. So I had kind of been like, oh, I do one week, and then I'd skip the next one, and then I do another one, and then I'd skip another one. And I was really, and now I'm like, nope. I'm not sure if it's always going to be the same day. I should, but I just know at least once a week, my audience is going to get a newsletter from me. So any question, let me scroll down here. I thought I wasn't getting any questions, and it's because the scroll thing. Don't lots of people have pop-up blockers? Yes, they do. And those people are mean and cruel, and they're missing out on the great content from you. I do not enjoy none of us like pop-ups, but I'm just here to tell you. And then Randy Black, who is works in IT, said, yep, some browsers turn on the pop-up blockers. So yeah, and those are just people you can't get to. That's fine. Yes, we're all chiming in. They're annoying. That's the Julie, Marty Pearson, podcaster and coach, says, hey, I am on Liz's email list and has great actionable content. Yeah, I met Liz, and what's kind of cool about Liz is she is a walking brand. She's really into the 90s. And so when you see her, she's dressed like it's 1990. And at first you're like, what is up with, but that's just Liz being Liz. If you're a big Survivor fan and you see her, you go, wait, wasn't she on? Yes, she was on Survivor 2 as well, but really knowledgeable. And here's the thing. Why Liz talks about email, she really, and by that, I mean really loves email. Like when you talk about having passion for a subject, she's just like, this is a way you can communicate. So keep that in mind. But yeah, she's got great stuff. Michelle we can't get off pop-ups, says the killers when you can't get them to go away. I just bought a tool from AppSumo. Again, it's a dangerous place. And when they first make the little form, and I was like, oh, that's sleazy and bad, and I would never do that. But they made the X to close the box the same color as the background, so it was invisible. And I was like, no, Dave Jackson doesn't do that. That's crazy. So keep that in mind that some people might try that trick, but that, again, makes it even more kind of sleazy. Danny says, what do you think of surveys, Dave, and how frequently would you send if in use? Well, number one, my middle name is actually Survey. If you look on my birth certificate, it's like David Survey Jackson. I love surveys. To me, I don't understand why we don't send them all the time, because we're all going, you hit publish and you go, oh, I hope this goes viral. Well, why not just ask people what they want? So I'm a big fan of that. And of course, Podpage has a built-in audience survey. If you haven't used the audience survey, why not? Are you kidding me? You should try it. I love the audience survey. I'll give you an example. In my survey, which is built into Podpage, I said, what are your favorite social places to go? And for me, where do I hang out? Twitter, for now, at least, and Facebook is where I hang out the most. And I do a little Instagram, and I sniff threads every now and then, this and that. And I looked at my results, and everybody's like, I'm on LinkedIn. And I was like, oh, I'm over here, and my audience is over here. Maybe I should go over here and hang out with my audience a little bit. So how often would you do them? That's a good question. You could do, if you're doing a weekly newsletter, if it was an easy to answer question, I wouldn't mind answering like, hey, what's your such and such? And then you're like, oh, that's a quick 2 answer. It doesn't require a lot of thought kind of answer. I wouldn't mind weekly. If it's monthly, that's fine. I know right now, Jeremy Ennis is doing a survey about podcast marketing. I wish I had that link. I would put it, somebody find that if you can, put it in the chat. And it is like a 5 to 10 minute survey. But when we get the results from that, it's so good. Because like he mentioned how so many people say that their podcast is being used to market their business. And yet how they are measuring success, you would think, oh, new customers and revenue, right? Nope. And that's where we all went, that's kind of, shouldn't that? So it's a nice mirror to hold up the podcasting space. So, but yeah, do more surveys. And I think sometimes we're worried that I'm going to send out a survey, and if they give me bad feedback, that's going to hurt. If they go, I'm pretty bored, I barely listen to the show. I'm weird. I would rather have bad feedback because I can fix that versus I'm just going to keep marketing it. And I'm to the point now I'm going to bust out my wallet. I'm going to start spending money on Facebook ads. Well, why? It's not resonating with your audience. It makes sense to make sure that it's working first before you go promoting it. And Ray has a good point. If you wait for the pop-up, sometimes those have a, hey, before you leave, here's 10% off. So yeah. But, and your audience often will let you know. They don't always. That's the part that always scares me. Like when you go to a restaurant and you go to the checkout and they go, how was everything? And you go, oh, good. And then you leave and you walk out the door and you look at the person that you came with and you're like, we are never eating there again. And I'm like, I'm always worried that when I go to people and ask them a survey and they go, oh yeah, everything's fine. And then they unsubscribe. Michelle says Ground News has single question polls embedded in their emails, so it's super easy. Click a multiple choice answer and keep reading, and it's not distracting. There you go. Never heard of Ground News. There are a few. I forget the one I used for a while. What was cool is Captivate has a way to have things that you use a lot, and you can easily just click on a drop down and say, "Oh, put the survey here," and whatever it was. I just made a generic survey that said, I think it was for the School of Podcasting. It's like, what episode did you listen to? And then on a scale from 1 to 10, how likely are you to share it with somebody? And I think there was a box to like type notes or something like that. So it was really generic. And that is sometimes the easiest way to do a survey, and yet the least effective way to do a survey. Because if you ask somebody, so like, what'd you think? Right? Really generic, open-ended, not very specific. You get a very open-ended, not very specific, not very helpful answer of, this is good. Okay, great. Thanks. I'll work on that. Whereas if you ask them, I love in Tom's book, which is what our survey is based on. I thought it was going to get that much quicker. Tom's book, by Tom, I mean Tom Webster. The Audience is Listening, a little guide to building a big podcast. But like a fun way to ask, is it too long or too short, is to ask, if I were to remove one thing from the show, what would you remove? Well, that's kind of asking, is it too long? And then it's like, hey, if I was going to add one thing to the show. So there are these little kind of sneaky ways of asking questions without just being so blunt. Although sometimes being blunt is really handy. But any other questions as I look up at the clock and I'm like, man, we're rounding third and heading home. I do appreciate everybody coming live. We have added, Danny, I agree with you. It's like required reading for me. One of the best books about podcasting around. I jokingly said to Tom, I said, you should have named it Your Baby's Ugly. I said, that's kind of what he's saying in most of the book. But a lot of times, we don't know what we don't know. I'll give you an example. The church I go to for about 5 years has had a logo with a typo in it. Like there's 2 L's, not one, and nobody caught it. So I'm always going back to surveys again. We don't see what our own stuff. We're way too close to it. And so that's why I think a survey is always good, because people will say, did you know that, my favorite, you guys ready for this? This actually happened like last Sunday night. I did an episode. I talked about my buddy Neil. I said, we're doing a GoFundMe. If you can chime in anything for Neil, please, click the link in the show notes. And I made my website show notes, and usually I just copy that and put it in there. And somehow I did not copy and paste the link to the GoFundMe. And luckily I had somebody email me and said, hey, do you know there's no, I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Because the episode was about pet peeves. And you know what one of my pet peeves is? When people don't put links in the show notes. And I was like, I did my own pet peeve. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. But that's why you should do your podcast the day before you release it, not, 10 minutes before you release it. So that's always good. But if we don't have any other questions, or if you guys had any other resources about newsletters, again, there's lots of information. If you go to any, like I noticed today, Aweber, which is a newsletter tool, they sent out an article that was really just a blog post. So if you're looking for more information on stuff like that, just go to any Aweber, MailChimp, MailerLite, ConvertKit, and check out their blog. They have all sorts of great content in terms of like what to write and, what's working and what's not working and things of that nature. So, all righty. Well, I'm checking the chat room. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, Danny. Thanks, Randy. Thanks, Ray, and everybody else that showed up today. We will do this again next month. I think next month we're going to have a guest kind of speaker come in, but it's always fun. And again, surveying you now, if you have an idea for a future monthly meetup, definitely let us know. We are open to suggestions on that. But until next month, I will see you in the Podpage Facebook group and on the socials and every place else. And if you have any questions about Podpage, don't forget to always email Podpage, email support at podpage.com. And we're always happy to get your feedback. So thanks so much for showing up. We'll see you again real soon. Go podcasting.